world stood still. Not a sound, not a breath. One decision, one single word, could bring life or destroy it all. As phones rang and leaders trembled, everyone asked the same terrible question. Is this the moment the world ends? Chapter 1. A Shadow over Kashmir. The wind was cold that morning. The sky was quiet, almost too quiet. Then, boom! A loud explosion shook the ground. Windows shattered, walls cracked. Smoke rose like a dark monster into the sky. People screamed and ran through the narrow streets of Kashmir. Mothers searched for children. Men pulled neighbors from burning buildings. Sirens cried in the distance, but help felt so far away. The news spread fast. A terrorist attack, they said. No one knew who had done it. No one knew why. But one thing was clear. This was not just another day. It was a warning, a terrible sign. The peace of the region had been broken again. In Delhi, the capital of India, the Prime Minister stood silent. His hands tightened into fists. His face showed pain and anger. Behind closed doors, his advisors whispered, "The world is watching," one said nervously. Another asked, "Should we strike back?" Outside, crowds gathered. They held pictures of loved ones lost. They lit candles under the dark sky. Tears fell as they prayed for justice, for answers, for peace. Meanwhile, in the small villages of Kashmir, life stood still. Shops were closed. Schools were empty. Children stared at the smoke rising in the distance. "Papa, will there be war?" one boy asked quietly. The father had no answer, only silence. He looked at the dark clouds and whispered, "I hope not, my son. I hope not." As night fell, the streets were empty. Only the sound of the cold wind remained. But behind the silence, danger was growing. India was preparing to answer. What would happen next? Would the next sunrise bring hope or horror? The world waited, holding its breath. Chapter 2. The Red Line Crossed. The attack had shocked India, but now silence had turned to anger. Strong, burning, unstoppable anger. In Delhi, the Prime Minister sat in a dark room. Around him, military leaders stood tall and serious. The air was heavy, tense. No one smiled. No one spoke loudly. A single sentence filled the room. This is an act of war. Outside, the streets were alive with protest. People shouted, waved flags, cried for action. Punish them! Protect us! Do not stay silent. The Prime Minister nodded slowly. He spoke calmly, but his words cut like steel. We will answer, and the world will hear us. The decision was made. The operation had a name, Operation Sindoor. In secret, fighter jets were prepared. Soldiers cleaned their weapons and folded letters for their families. Pilots kissed pictures of loved ones before walking into the night. The command came at midnight. Engines roared in the darkness. Jets took off, their lights disappearing into the cold sky. As they flew toward the border, the pilots thought quietly, "Are we going to stop a war or start one?" Far below, the people of Kashmir slept, unaware. The world was about to change At dawn, explosions rocked the mountains. Indian planes struck what they called terrorist camps across the border. Buildings collapsed. Smoke and dust filled the air. The news spread like wildfire. Television screens around the world showed the burning camps. Some cheered, some cried, some prayed. In Pakistan, the government reacted fast. Their leaders stood, faces cold and hard. "This line has been crossed," they warned. "There will be consequences." As the sun set, the two nations stared at each other across the border, like two angry giants, ready to fight. And far away, ordinary people whispered to themselves, "What happens now? Will they stop, or will the fires of war grow bigger?" The world waited again, in fear, in silence, knowing the worst could still come. Chapter 3. Operation Sindoor begins. The sky was dark, silent, but deep inside the clouds, Indian fighter jets flew like shadows, strong, fast, deadly. The pilots held their breath. They crossed the border into Pakistan's territory. The mission was clear: strike the camps, return home safely. One pilot whispered a prayer, "Please, let this end quickly." Suddenly, boom! Missiles hit their targets. Buildings exploded into fire and dust. The mountains shook with the sound of war. On the ground, panic spread. People ran from their homes, searching for safety. Children cried. Mothers shouted for their sons. In Delhi, officials watched the news with serious faces. The defense minister spoke quietly. The operation was a success. The camps are gone. Reporters rushed to spread the news across the world. Some called India's action brave. Others called it dangerous. Was this justice, or had India gone too far? In Pakistan, the anger was rising. Crowds filled the streets of Islamabad. They waved flags and shouted, "You will not break us. We will answer." Pakistan's government held emergency meetings. Generals pointed at maps. Fighter jets were prepared for takeoff. The two nations stood face to face, like two warriors, staring, waiting for the next move. At the border, soldiers stood under the cold stars, tired, scared, but ready. One soldier looked at the dark sky and whispered, "Will this be the night the world changes forever?" The tension grew, minute by minute. Was this only the beginning? Would Pakistan strike back? The world watched. The next chapter of this dangerous story was about to be written. Chapter 4. Pakistan Strikes Back. The morning was cold, too cold. A heavy silence covered the land. Everyone knew something was coming. In Pakistan's air bases, pilots prepared in silence. Mechanics checked the jets again and again. The order was clear: strike back, not with words, but with power. At noon, the skies came alive. Fighter jets raced across the clouds. Engines screamed. Wings cut through the wind like sharp blades. Across the border, Indian soldiers spotted them first. "Enemy jets!" they shouted. Sirens wailed. Soldiers ran to their posts. The ground shook as bombs fell. Explosions rocked military targets in India. Smoke rose high into the sky, dark and heavy. The people of Kashmir ran for cover once again. Children hid under beds. Elders prayed loudly under the open sky. In Islamabad, people cheered. "We are strong," they shouted. "No one will break us." But across both countries, ordinary families wept. In Delhi and Lahore, mothers held photographs of missing sons. Fathers stood in long lines outside hospitals. The price of pride was becoming clear. That night, the two countries stared at each other again. Two powerful giants, two ancient enemies, both hurt, both angry, both ready for more. Was this just revenge? Or had the door to full war been opened? As midnight approached, the cold winds blew once more. The world held its breath, waiting, fearing what the morning would bring. Chapter 5. The sky becomes a battlefield. The sun rose over the mountains of Kashmir, but the beauty was lost. The skies were no longer blue and peaceful. They were now a battlefield. Drones buzzed high above like silent, watchful predators. Invisible, deadly, always watching. Indian drones crossed into Pakistan's airspace. Pakistani drones circled over Indian bases. Each side gathered information, planned attacks, prepared for the next strike. The people below looked up with fear. "What are those things in the sky, Papa?" a little girl asked. Her father stared silently, his eyes dark and full of worry. He whispered, "I don't know, but I pray they don't bring death." Then, without warning, the attacks began. Missiles launched from unseen drones. Explosions lit up the mountains like flashes of lightning. Boom, boom, boom. Buildings crumbled, trees burned. Animals fled into the forests. Neither army backed down. Neither leader wanted to show weakness. In a small village, an old man stood watching. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "I have seen this before," he said softly. First in 1947, then again in 1965, 1971, 1999. Always the same story. When will we learn? As the day turned to night, the skies remained dangerous. Drones continued to fly in the dark. One wrong move, one mistaken target, could bring something far worse than local war. Could it bring nuclear disaster? The world watched in terror. Everyone asked the same question. How close were India and Pakistan to crossing the final line? The answer was coming soon. Chapter 6. The Nuclear Shadow. The world stood still. Time seemed to freeze. Two words filled every headline, every conversation, every nightmare. Nuclear war. In Delhi, the Prime Minister stared out the window. The city lights glowed below, peaceful, unaware of the danger above them. On his desk lay the red phone, silent, heavy, waiting. In Islamabad, the same scene played out. The Pakistani president sat in silence. His generals stood close by, eyes sharp, voices low. The decision rested on his shoulders, and his alone. Both leaders knew the truth. Both had the power to end millions of lives with just one order. A single push of a button. The people of India and Pakistan did not sleep. In homes, on streets, in refugee camps, men and women whispered in fear. Will they really do it? Will tomorrow be our last sunrise? The skies over Kashmir remained filled with drones and fighter jets. Each side watched the other. Each side waited. One mistake, one miscalculation could mean disaster. World leaders moved quickly. Phones rang in the middle of the night. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, and diplomats spoke urgently. In Washington, the U.S. president leaned forward. "We cannot let this happen," he said. In Beijing, Moscow, London, Paris, the same words were spoken. They called Delhi. They called Islamabad. They begged. They warned. Step back. Talk. Think of your people. But pride is a powerful force, and anger can make even wise men deaf. In Delhi, the Prime Minister's voice was cold. "Our country has been attacked. We will not kneel." In Islamabad, the President replied firmly, "We did not start this, but we will finish it if we must." The streets filled again. In Mumbai, Karachi, Lahore, Delhi, people marched holding candles. Children wrote signs. "Please stop." Elders whispered prayers under the dark sky. A mother held her baby close and wept. "I don't care about politics," she whispered. "I just want my child to live." Meanwhile, the armies stood ready. Missiles were moved into position. Nuclear submarines waited under the cold ocean waves. Bomber planes circled in the dark, unseen by human eyes. In a secret military bunker, an Indian general stared at the screen. The words blinked red. "Ready to launch." He closed his eyes. His hand trembled. Was this the right path? Could they return from this edge? Across the border, a Pakistani officer faced the same question. Could he live with the choice to destroy cities, families, futures? Could anyone? Then, the phones rang again. This time, the voices were not angry. They were soft, pleading. "Do not cross this line. There will be no going back." The sun began to rise over the mountains of Kashmir. Soft, golden light touched the trees, the rivers, the ruined villages. For a moment, just a small moment, peace returned. No missile was launched. No button was pushed. The danger had passed, for now. But the fear remained. Everyone knew how close the world had come. One more step, one more second, and history would have changed forever. As the leaders stepped back from the edge, they asked themselves, how many more times can we be lucky? The answer was cold, uncertain, terrifying. And somewhere, a small child in Kashmir looked up at the peaceful morning sky and whispered, "Thank you." But for how long? The story was not over. Chapter 7. Diplomats in the Dark. The clock ticked. Each second passed like the beat of a drum before a storm. The world waited, held its breath, hoped. In New York, the tall glass buildings of the United Nations stood silent and strong. Inside, the halls were filled with voices, serious, urgent, afraid. Diplomats from every corner of the world had gathered, men in suits, women in traditional dress, faces young and old. But their words were the same. We must stop this. We are running out of time. Around the long table, representatives from India and Pakistan sat, their eyes cold, their bodies tense. Neither wanted to speak first. Neither wanted to appear weak. The president of the Security Council stood. His voice echoed through the heavy silence. This is not just your fight. This is the world's fight for peace. Far away in Geneva, talks continued. Day became night. Night became day. Tired eyes, dry voices, sleepless minds. They searched for a solution. Any solution. Before it was too late. In Beijing, leaders watched closely. In Moscow, they whispered behind closed doors. In Washington, the president walked the floor, thinking deeply. What can we do? What if they don't listen? Meanwhile, on the cold, snowy borders of Kashmir, soldiers waited. Young men and women in uniforms stood quietly, breath visible in the icy air, fingers stiff from holding heavy weapons too long, eyes scanning the mountains. The sky. The enemy. One soldier whispered to his friend, "Will we fight tomorrow?" The friend shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but I pray we don't." In the cities of India and Pakistan, people gathered in the streets. They held signs, they lit candles, they marched in silence. "We want peace," they shouted. "No more war." But would the powerful hear the soft voices of the ordinary? Would pride and politics drown out human hope? The clock kept ticking. Back in New York, the Indian diplomat spoke at last. "We were attacked. We demand justice." The Pakistani diplomat stood quickly. "We were attacked too. We will defend ourselves." The room filled with arguments, shaking hands, angry words. The walls seemed to close in. The air grew heavy with fear. Then, an elderly woman from a small island nation stood. Her voice was soft, yet strong. "I have seen war. I have lost family to war. Do not make the same mistake. Talk, listen. Remember the people who trust you to protect them." The room fell silent. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Outside, the snow continued to fall on the soldiers in Kashmir, their uniforms cold, their hearts colder. They waited for an order that, thankfully, had not yet come. The talks were not over. The danger was not gone. The risk remained, like a dark cloud waiting to return. But for now, there was still a chance. A chance to choose words over weapons. A chance to step back from the edge. As the diplomats left the room, walking slowly, the question remained. Would this be the night the world chose peace or war? The answer was still unknown. The next sunrise would tell the story. Chapter 8. The People's Voices. The streets were full, yet strangely quiet. In Delhi, in Islamabad, in Mumbai and Lahore, the people gathered. They did not come with weapons. They came with candles, with flowers, with signs written in simple words, "No more war. We want peace." A mother held her child close as she walked. Her hands shook slightly in the cold night air. She whispered to her baby, "I will protect you, no matter what happens." Beside her, a young student raised a small sign. His face was serious, determined. "I am only one person," he thought, "but my voice matters." The streets glowed softly with candlelight, like tiny stars in the darkness. The people walked slowly together, as one. In a small town in Kashmir, an old teacher stood at the front of the march. His steps were weak, but his spirit was strong. "I have lived through too many wars," he said quietly. I will not be silent again. The crowd moved forward, past government buildings, past soldiers who stood watching. The soldiers did not stop them. Some even lowered their weapons and bowed their heads in respect. A young girl held her grandmother's hand tightly. "Grandma, will they listen to us?" she asked. The woman smiled softly, though sadness filled her eyes. "I don't know, my dear. I don't know. But we must try." The marches spread. In the schools, children drew pictures of doves and olive branches. In the mosques and temples, prayers were whispered. Prayers for courage, prayers for peace, prayers that the leaders would hear the cries of their people. In the capitals, government leaders watched from behind tall windows. They saw the crowds. They heard the soft chants rise into the cold night air. One general looked out and frowned. "Do they really think candles and songs can stop a war?" he said. Another man, older and wiser, answered quietly, "Sometimes, yes." The news cameras showed the world the peaceful marches. Reporters spoke softly, their voices full of emotion. "Something special is happening tonight," they said. "Ordinary people are standing together against fear." But would it be enough? Could peaceful protests stop the powerful? Could candles push back the darkness? As the march reached the city square, the people stood still. Thousands of faces, young and old, full of hope, full of fear. They sang softly, "Let there be peace, let there be peace." The song rose like a soft wave in the night, gentle, but unstoppable. And for the first time in days, the guns were silent. The drones stopped flying. The warplanes stayed on the ground. The leaders met once more. The voices of their people filled their hearts and minds. They looked at each other, tired and unsure. One leader spoke slowly. "Our people do not want war." The other nodded. "Neither do ours." But neither side knew what to do next. Neither side wanted to lose. The silence of the guns was only temporary. Would this soft wave of hope grow stronger or fade away? Would the candles stay lit or be blown out by the winds of pride and power? As the people stood under the dark sky, the question remained. Was this the beginning of peace, or just a pause before the storm? The answer was still waiting. Chapter 9. The world holds its breath. The night was heavy. The air itself seemed to stop moving, waiting. In government buildings across Delhi and Islamabad, the lights stayed on. No one slept. Not the leaders, not the generals, not the people. Phones rang sharply, breaking the silence. Every call carried fear. Every voice spoke the same words. Is it time? Inside a cold military command center in India, a general stood staring at the large red button. His hand trembled slightly. One command, one word, would change the world forever. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Is this really the only way?" Across the border, in Pakistan, the same scene played out. A high-ranking officer wiped sweat from his forehead. He stared at the blinking lights on his control panel. He thought of his wife, his children, his country. He thought of the millions of innocent people. Outside, on the snowy mountains of Kashmir, soldiers waited in the dark. They clutched their rifles tightly. They listened for the distant sound of jets, of missiles, of war. But there was only silence. In the cities, families gathered close. Some sat by candlelight. Some held hands and prayed. Some simply stared at the walls, too frightened to speak. A little boy in Lahore asked softly, "Papa, will the sun rise tomorrow?" The father could only hold him tighter and whisper, "I hope so, my son. I hope so." World leaders called again. From Washington, Beijing, Moscow, London, they pleaded, "Do not do this. Step back. Think of your people." The Indian Prime Minister stood by the window, watching the lights of his city. The Pakistani president sat in silence, staring at the family photo on his desk. Both men carried the weight of nations. Both knew what history would say if they failed. The hours passed slowly. Every tick of the clock sounded louder than before. Boom, 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 like a heart beating too fast. In New York, at the United Nations, diplomats waited with pale faces. No one spoke. No one moved. And then, the phone stopped ringing. The orders did not come. The missiles were not launched. The soldiers stood down. The world held its breath, and then exhaled. In the early morning light, the first rays of sun touched the mountains of Kashmir. The rivers shimmered gently. Birds sang carefully, as if afraid to break the fragile peace. Across India and Pakistan, people woke slowly. They turned on their radios, their televisions, their phones. The news came. The worst has been avoided, for now. Tears fell. Smiles returned. The people hugged their children, their parents, their neighbors. Life had been given another chance, but the fear remained. How close had they come to the end? Would next time be different? Would the leaders remember this night? A young woman standing by the river whispered to the wind, "We are safe, for now, but for how long?" The story was not finished. The future was still unwritten. The world had stepped back from the edge, this time, but the shadow of war had not completely disappeared. It waited, watched, ready to return if pride and anger took control again. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, the people of India and Pakistan walked outside once more. They breathed the fresh morning air deeply. They smiled at the gift of another day. And somewhere, in a quiet village of Kashmir, a child laughed. His innocent voice rose into the sky, a small, bright hope against the dark cloud that had almost covered the world. The world listened. The world prayed. The world held its breath. Again.